Hello everyone, how doing? Welcome to another Piesta's Movie Reviews, where I talk about the latest movies that I've been watching. I'm trying a different format, trying to see if it makes sense to keep doing movie review videos in my channel or not. So this is going to be like a pack of the entire movies that I've been watching throughout the latest months instead of being specific single movie. I'm going to talk about 12 of them. So yeah, I hope you find it interesting. Let me know in the comments below if you've already seen of these movies, if you have any interest in any of them. I love talking about movies, so feel free to start a conversation about that. Let's get started with the first movie that I watched, and it was an interesting view. So I've been having Apple, or I had Apple TV Plus for a few months at the end of 2021. So I caught up with a few new releases that came out through there. One of them was this one, The Velvet Underground, a documentary sort of movie about the band, The Velvet Underground. It's always interesting seeing documentaries about music. I always find them fascinating since I'm music myself and also have a label. It's very interesting to see how the whole music industry evolved throughout the time and how it was like in different niches and genres and that kind of stuff. So I always find it very fascinating. This documentary was pretty well made. It gave a good insight into the story of the band, which I wasn't that familiar with. I only knew it in passage. I thought they were a lot more famous. I mean, they are famous, but they kind of declined in popularity at some point, which I found it interesting. I always thought they were like this big hit that just stayed there, and apparently they were totally doing stuff outside the scope of the current scene and somehow managed to get embroiled. They had this very psychedelic drone exploring sound to them. I didn't know that they were so related with drone, which is one of the genres that I do and looked into a lot, and I never had references from the Velvet Underground into it. I did recognize some of the names that were listed and showed up in the documentary talking about drone music and how drone music became incorporated into some acts, namely the Velvet Underground, and being explored there. But I didn't know they were that much into it, and they were so influential or influenced by the exploring drone genre that was showing up at the time. It's also very interesting to hear about the whole Andy Warhol thing. I only knew that Andy Warhol designed the cover. I had no idea he was like sort of a manager, mentor to the project overall. Also, the rise of the multimedia as a keyword. At the time, it was like this avant-garde thing, and nowadays it's like everything is multimedia. You don't have a concerts anymore without a DVD playing something on the background or lights shimmering everywhere. And at the time, it was like groundbreaking to have multiple projectors showing stuff. So it's very interesting and funny to see that. So yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. Do recommend it. Does have a pretty good rating at IMDb, so you can see that it's worthwhile. And for fans of Velvet Underground, there are people who are just curious about the origins of the band and how they evolved. I think it was really well done. So yeah, congratulations to whoever was involved. Let's move on to the next movie. The next movie that I had in line and watched on 2021 was Tom Hanks' Finch, also on Apple Plus. I was interested. I kind of like Tom Hanks usually as an actor and a director. He did some stuff that I found very interesting. Some is a bit, I don't want to say cliche, but I don't know. Anyways, about this movie in particular is the movie of Tom Hanks and his companion robot. They also have a dog, as you can see here. I'm gonna refresh this so you can actually see part of the trailer. It's a very interesting story. It's a sort of apocalyptic future where you need to be careful of the sun. And there are not that many people alive. And he manages to bunker down and bring this robot into life, who he starts educating and becomes a bit of a friend to him. But he's still learning, the robot's still learning how to be a robot, how to be a sentient being in the world. So he makes some mistakes, and it's interesting to have that machine or machine learning dynamic portrayed. It's not new, but it was, I think, pretty decently executed here. The movie itself, the storyline of the movie isn't particularly relevant. There are other movies who did it a bit better. And also, like, Black Mirror also has similar themes around this, and it was directed a bit better, and in terms of CGI also better done. I remember other movies as well from the South African director, is it Charlie, I think, or Chappie, something like that, which also features some robots, and it's also very well made. So it's not the first robot themed. It's not bad, but it's not amazing either. It's interesting for what it is. So yeah, 6.9 IMDb, so they kind of agree with me overall. Still interesting to see. I got some things out of it, but yeah. Another movie that I watched recently was Upgrade from 2018. Had been on the watch list for a while. Finally managed some time to find it. Story of this man, also again in a sort of dystopic future. Not that dystopic, it's pretty much our future, just slightly ahead of its time technologically. So it's pretty much a sci-fi story. And it's about bionic upgrades, pretty much. A man that gets crippled at some point, and there's some way with some machines and chips to make him have control of his body again. So he allows himself to get into that experiment, and a lot of twists happen in there somewhere. And it's interesting analysis, also relating to the previous movie with Finch, how machines and computers become sentient beings, and the distinction, the line between human and machine, and what they do, what they don't allow, but they allow us to do, how they empower us, and how we should be skeptic of technological advances, the benefits and the downsides of having that sort of technology freely available and easily available, and the dangers of stuff behind it. It's kind of a bit cliche if you already read a lot of cyberpunk or seen a lot of cyberpunk referenced movies, so the movie wasn't particularly interesting in that regard, but I think the acting was very on point. The cinematography, the camera work was really cool, especially like the shots where they fixed focus on the person and the entire world would rotate around it, so it had a very mechanical feel to it, which I can't quite explain. And I think I actually picked this movie because it got an Oscar or something at some point. I'm not sure anymore, but I think that was the reason why I picked it on my to watch list. Don't see anything. Don't see any mention of it here. But yeah, it was really interesting to see. Not particularly good, but nice entertainment. So yeah, 7.5 IMDb rating, so the general public also agrees. But if you're into cyberpunk and machine sentience and that kind of stuff, I think it's a really cool movie to check out. So talking about machines and sentience, the Matrix Ressurections, the fourth movie of the Matrix after many years. It's very meta. That's the main thing that I can think of when I was watching the movie. They have a lot of self-reference, and it wasn't completely bad, but it wasn't really good either. And they embrace the cliche, or they try to embrace it, while still sustaining a heavy dose of action versus pseudo philosophy behind the whole thing. Doesn't quite reach the level of the first original Matrix. It's a nice comeback to the Matrix world, to the Matrix thing, but at the same time I felt like it didn't completely deliver, and I guess that's one of the reasons that it also got such negative reaction. 5.7, it's a very bad rating for IMDb. I think it also got bad reviews in terms of press. I think overall, like, the acting was decent. The direction was also decent. I think the main plot hole was actually the script. Like, they focused so much on the meta aspect of the Matrix that they forgot to give it like a sort of an original story. Well, it's original, but it's like, I don't know how to put this. It follows the original formula too much. It's too much attached to the original Matrix, which is also always a problem when you're doing sequels. You want to do something different, but not too different. Otherwise, people will say that it's not the same. That's maybe why you shouldn't be focusing on doing remakes or sequels to stuff and focus on new material instead. But I don't know. Was still interesting to watch, interesting thing. A lot of references also to the change of focus role from male to female. So a lot of female characters are more important, and this the importance of being non-binary and not having like a male dominant role is also very present here, which makes sense with the entire stuff that Wachowski's been doing on the last years. And I'm a fan of Wachowski. I love Sense8, for example, despite also exploring this a lot. So I'm a very open-minded person in that regard. So I enjoy these kinds of movies that make you reflect on those things, and they take the general role that is like the main character being a man, and they flip it on its head, which makes complete sense because there are a lot of stories where females are the main role, and it still makes sense to have that and don't need like a man to go save them. So in this case, a bit of a spoiler alert, Trinity becomes a bit of the main character as well, but it's made in a very interesting way. So I thought it was well made. Maybe too many references to the original Matrix stuff. I don't know. As a sequel, it felt like it was lacking something, but it was still entertaining. You do need to have the other Matrix movies fresh in your head before going into this one, though. There are a lot of stuff that you'll miss otherwise. Anyways, next movie that I looked at Don't Look Up from where did I get this from? Netflix. It's a parody movie about a comet hitting the world and the politicians being too busy with their own political agendas to really pay proper attention. It's a very humoristic, satirical movie, and scary at the same point because it's way too real to what's happening. Like social media dominating and politics being about controlling the social media and the propaganda of ratings and things like that become more important than saving the planet where we live, which is already happening. I mean, we have all this ecological issues that are not being properly addressed because people are more self-absorbed into just getting in power and helping their capitalist friends push their financial agenda forward instead of saving the world and ending world hunger and, you know, those kind of humanitarian things that we could very easily be doing if it wasn't for people being people. So this movie explores that a lot of emphasis on the comical importance that people give to social media, hopefully forcing some people to reflect on the importance, on the overly importance that we give social media overall. I don't think the people who need to get that will get that by watching the movie, but it's still a nice way to point it out for them. Great acting overall, very interesting characters. Fun movie to watch. 7.2 IMDb. Overall, I think it's the general audience agrees with me. Moving on to the other movie that I watched, Industrial Accident: The Story of Wax Trax Records, was recommended to me after I mentioned that I like music documentaries, and also that I like industrial music. Had no clue that Wax Trax was so important in the American scene and bringing industrial music to the American scene. Not just industrial music, but electronic music overall. Stuff that was happening in Europe didn't go over to the United States that much. And Wax Trax was an independent, well, they were a record store to begin with, and then they became also a label. And they were promoters, also organizing bands who went through, I think Chicago is the city where they were based, to play there, and bring them from Europe to play there, involve them in the tour, and eventually release their records also in the United States. And it was a bit of a cult following in the early industrial punk scene on the United States. And sadly went downhill, as most cool stuff in the music industry does. People sell out. They start going for where the money is, and instead of relying on the people who help them get where they are, they go after the money and don't give a shit about the people who help them get where they are. Happens a lot to a lot of indie labels and promoters. It's human nature to go after the money instead of the art. They start going for the art, but then they realize that they need money to pay the bills at the end of the day, and they end up selling out sooner or later, or regretting not having sold out at some point in their lives. So, story of Wax Trax, really nice documentary. Story of the couple who managed the store pretty much overall, because they were Wax Trax, they embodied Wax Trax. So it was very interesting to see how they managed to make such a vibrant community and like a meeting point for so many people, not just to consume music, but also artists as well. They were heavily influenced by Wax Trax. So yeah. Very cool documentary. Learned a lot from it. Had no clue that they were such a force on those years, sprouting a lot of the industrial electronic scene in the United States. Another movie that I watched was As Above, So Below. This is a terror horror sort of movie. It's mostly shot at the catacombs in Paris. I usually like these kind of movies where you go underground and then some weird stuff starts happening, and it's terror all the way. It has some puzzles, has some the usual relationship paradigms that shift as you become more absorbed in horror. Like you go underground, everyone is friendly with each other, and then something happens and suddenly you start stabbing each other. So there's always a certain sociological or psychological aspect that is fun to analyze, and I kind of like those kind of movies at some point, but it depends on the momentum a lot, or in the moment that you watch them. This one didn't catch me as well as I would hope. It's an okay movie if you like the genre. It has some good effects, it has some good acting, but overall I felt like the characters were too superficial. They could have explored it a little bit better. Also, they wanted to have a first person sort of feel, but it felt like way too forced. Like you would never have an expedition with those many cameras on everyone. So that alone kind of broke the immersivity of it all. It just felt like way too forced. Let's have a first person thing on everyone. There are a lot of other movies that managed to do a much better job at that. I'm thinking about Clover, for example, or Wreck, those kind of things. So yeah, recommended if you're into the genre. If you're not into the genre, it's nice for a scare day, for a scary night. Or if you're interested in the Paris catacombs, the myths behind the Paris catacombs is also an interesting movie to check out. More movies before we end the video. Ghostbusters Afterlife. So I had no clue there was a new Ghostbusters out. I thought there was only the remake with an all-female cast, which was alright, nothing overwhelming, but it was enjoyable. Apparently they went back to the franchise one more time and did this one that just got released. It's okay. It's not bad. You kind of need to know the original Ghostbusters for this one to make some sense. If you go fresh without having watched the other ones, there are some references that you don't really catch. But overall, I think it was well made. It brings out a new generation of Ghostbusters, hence the Afterlife. It connects with the old part somewhat decently. Some scenes were a bit cheesy in that regard. It felt like too much attached to the original. But it kind of worked, so and it kind of stood on its own as well. So I think it was a pretty decent sequel, all things considered. No clue if they're gonna do any more in the franchise or not, but this one was all right. 7.2 IMDb rating. If you compare this for the Matrix sequel, for example, like this is like the 4th movie in the franchise as well. And this one got much better rating, so this one was considered like a very much more welcome follow-up than the Matrix. But then again, the hype for the Matrix was a lot higher as well, and that also affects how people judge the expectations, the expectation management. And I think in terms of budget, Ghostbusters Afterlife was a lot lower key than Matrix Resurrections. So yeah, there's that. Talking about big budget movies, I also managed to watch Dune, the original, the remake, the final remake after so many years of Dune. A lot of good criticism for this one. It's very faithful to the original story. I think it was well done overall. I think it was a well done adaptation of the thing. The characters were well chosen, well portrayed, well acted. CGI was what you would expect from a movie made in 2020. I think all the elements were there, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the movies. I'm a bit sad that even though we will have these movies, having read all of the books, I don't think the trilogy will go beyond the basic storyline of Dune, which is a shame. But I mean, if they complete that alone, I think it's already more than they did with the original Dune, so that's already a plus. But there's so much more down the line with the entire Ben Gesserit lore behind the thing, the importance of robots, the importance of spice, how the whole thing will evolve, the foreseeing the future will evolve so much in the storyline that the first few books don't really portray that, and I feel that the first movies also will not be able to completely achieve that. But I mean, if they are in the same quality as this first one, I think it's a very welcome sight, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing the Harkonnen getting kicked on their rears by Fremen forces. Some things that I missed on the movie that I wish they had incorporated was the special room that was in the palace. That is like sort of, it's not an oasis, it's more like it's a room full of plants, which in a planet where drought is imminent everywhere. It was like something that you shouldn't have. And the original book has a lot more lore behind that, the importance of that specific room and secret messages that were traded between the Bene Gesserit to prepare for the move. So those details kind of got lost in this adaptation, but still I think that the first part of the movie made it very clear of the plan that the Bene Gesserit had for or the support that they tried to play on the switch between the Harkonnen and House Atreides on Dune. So yeah, overall I think it's a good adaptation. If you're a fan of Dune, you should definitely watch it. If you're not a fan of Dune, you should also watch it because it's very cool. Especially like the ornithopters. I think they were very well designed. I think heavily inspired by the original wannabe movie made by the guy, which I obviously don't remember right now, which was Jodorowsky. Jodorowsky tried to do an adaptation. He also had Geiger involved, I think, in the project, or Mobius involved in the project, or both, and it kind of didn't go because of lack of funding or something. And that was even before they made the 80s movie with David Lynch. So before David Lynch, there already had been a Dune movie adaptation attempt, which had a lot more conceptual artwork done, which became a bit of lore in terms of Dune stuff. Like whenever you talk about Dune adaptations, those sketches always show up, and like the first visual ideas of what the whole aspect of Dune was, and how those ornithopters looked like, how the spice collecting machines looked like. The airlift surprised me a lot, like on this movie in particular. I was not expecting the spice machine collector to look like that, but I think it was still acceptable. I enjoyed the ambience of the entire movie overall. So well done, whoever was in charge of that, of all those aspects and all those details. Looking forward for the follow-ups, and yeah, I had a rating of 8.1 out of 10, so generally the general audience agrees with me. Last but not least, we saw this quick movie the other day, The Tourist, released in 2010. We had it lying around on our computer for quite a while. It must have been downloaded for some sort of watching marathon because it has Angelina Jolie and Johnny Depp. It was the first time that we saw it. It wasn't bad. It's a bit of a comedy kind of movie. Both Angelina Jolie and Johnny Depp are okay in the role. The movie itself doesn't have that much deepness into it, but it's not a bad, like a Sunday afternoon movie. It's not bad. It has like some spy action sort of thing. It was a decent movie. It was okay. It wasn't that bad. Wasn't much of a hit, as you can see, 6 out of 10 IMDb rating, but for what it was, I think it was entertaining. So yeah, so those were the movies that I watched on these last few months. If you watched this far, please let me know what you think of the format. Do you prefer this over talking about just one specific movie? Do you think people just don't care about movie reviews, or my movie reviews in particular, and I should be focusing my efforts on something else? That will be very heartbreaking to hear, but please let me know anyways on the comments below. Anyways, those are the movies that I've been watching recently, and that was Piesta's movie reviews. Thanks for watching. See you next video. Bye bye everyone. Don't forget to like, subscribe, donate a kidney, all that jazz. And if you like these kind of contents that I do for my channel, you can also go to patreon.com/psenough and sponsor me for upcoming content that there is. You're very much welcome to pay me a coffee or pay me a beer, since I don't drink coffee, or help me put food on the plate and improve the overall setup for my videos. So yeah, that's it for this one. See you next one. Bye bye everyone. Take care.